And so as I go within to that center of me, I acknowledge that one presence, that life, and that divine consciousness, that this one body, this one mind that is creating everything from itself is the center of peace, the center of calm and wholeness. And because it is creating everything from itself, of itself, I know that this is love, this unlimited givingness of spirit. And because it is all there is, I know that that is what I am. My nature is this peace, this love, this givingness, this calm and wholeness, right where I am. Because there's only one body. My body is God's body. My consciousness is informed and flowing with this spirit. And because that is my truth, I know that that is the truth of everyone and everything. For there's no separation. It is all one. And so as I realize this oneness, this peace, this love, I realize that I am fully supported and nurtured by everything and every experience, for I am within God. And that is good. And so I know that every experience, no matter what its expression is, that I am being given opportunities to grow, to see a deeper beauty within myself and all there is. For it is God. That I get to feel that presence within me in every moment. And I'm so grateful for this. Grateful knowing that this gift and this blessing is given to all, for spirit is right where they are. And so I release this with great gratitude for this peace, this wholeness, and this ever-present love. And I simply say yes to its truth and know that it is manifested right here and now. And so it is.
So we've been working this whole year, as many of you know, on a grand rising. Yes? Yes? And this month we are working on the idea of moving from pieces into peace. Fun little play on words. So today, our topic is waking up to oneness. Waking up to oneness. Oneness is foundational to being able to live in peace, to understand that there is a oneness and we are one with it, one of it, not separate from it ever in any way, not in any little iota of our being, and the same is true for everything in existence, is foundational to our peace. When we view the world through the lens of separation, through everything being in pieces and not oneness, it gets to be a scary place, yes? Some of us have, has anybody besides me forgot that we're not one at every moment? You've had that experience? Okay, good. So it gets scary when we forget that. Our belief that we're separate from God, from each other, from the planet, from all of life is the root of all evil. Sorry, Paul, you were wrong. We separate ourselves, well, you were part right, but not all the way right. We separate ourselves not in reality, capital R reality, but in perception, in how we see. from the reality of deep peace that is derived from recognizing our own wholeness and our oneness with all. And when we forget that, we end up in pieces, seeing separation and moving into fear and judgment and fighting for our perspective. I'm right, you're wrong. We move into protectiveness, we move into greed because there's not enough, and all that stuff. Yes? For reference, view much of the world today. But despite the appearances of separation, behind the appearance is the truth of oneness. And whether we call it Tao, Spirit, the infinite presence, or the ineffable singularity, I saw it, yeah, there's Tim. It is oneness, indivisible. It can't be anything else, otherwise it would be against itself and it would self-destruct. Take that. We're going to do a little philosophy today, by the way. Yesterday we were in a It has to be one, it couldn't be anything else, otherwise it would have aspects of itself against itself and it would self-destruct. So it has to be a unified wholeness, harmonious within itself. Otherwise, it's sort of like, you fly planes. Otherwise, it's an airplane that starts to vibrate and vibrate and vibrate and pretty soon destroys itself, which you don't want to have happen in midair. Not really. So there is a harmonious wholeness that is always expressing its own nature. We see aspects of it, and we call those aspects life and love and light and power and peace and beauty and joy, but even that is just as much as we can see. It's greater still. Yes? Whatever I think, whatever you think that this infinite presence is, it's more than that. And then it's more than that, and then it's infinitely more than that. So it's sort of like when we look up at the stars, and we see maybe, if we're standing in our backyard, maybe we see 100 or so. And then we get something like binoculars or a telescope, and suddenly there are a lot more stars, yes? And then we go out to a high, dark place, maybe an observatory, or we launch a satellite way out into space, away from the atmosphere and the pollution of the planet, and suddenly there are a whole lot more stars, yes? But did the actual number of stars change? They were always there, we just couldn't see them. In the same way, there is a reality, capital R reality here, but just like the atmosphere and light pollution of the earth, along with the limits of the human eye, keep us from fully seeing the stars, the atmosphere and the pollution of millennia of mental conditioning keep us from a clear, full view of the oneness, which, whether we see it or not, is there. Just like whether we see all the stars or not, they're there. So the only way we can see the oneness more clearly is to stretch outside of the atmosphere of separation, the atmosphere of our conditioning, to stretch further than that, which we so often separate to create what-ifs. If we create what-ifs in our mind, what if we are all one, how would I act? How would I relate to life? How would this circumstance in my life feel different for me if I recognized that it was a oneness? How would I treat others? How would I treat myself? How would I express in the world? See, we need to recognize that each of us has hung a mental screen between ourselves and the direct experience of oneness. And we are projecting onto that screen. And what we're projecting onto that screen is our own beliefs, our own conditioning, all of that stuff, yes? Yes? We are, trust me. At least that's my belief, and I'm projecting that onto the screen of reality. And then we're believing and perceiving the reflection as reality. And if we want to know where we do this most strongly, we need to only notice what upsets us the most. We project ourselves, our concept of ourselves, onto this screen so that it seems to be a form out there, when in reality it's only a reflection and perception of what is within us. I love to chant with Krishna Das. I haven't for a while, but years ago I heard him one time say that when we come into spirituality, we bring our personality to our spirituality. So rather than letting the spirituality transform our personality, the first thing we do is try to transform the spirituality into an agreement with our personality. Yes? And this is why you have people of all kinds of religions and teachings, including our own, and we say, but you say that you follow that teacher, but you're acting like that. How can you do that? It's because we bring our own personality. Those people out there, they do it. I don't do this, by the way. Okay, well, so maybe yesterday afternoon I was driving Linda Bremer somewhere, and a guy pulled out in front of me on the road and deliberately slowed down, got to his turn, and very deliberately took forever to turn. And I gave him a gesture. 2 fingers. Peace. And I told Linda that. I said, I only gave him the peace sign. And she looked at me and said, why did you feel the need to give him a gesture at all? Oh. So we all do this, yes? Okay, Buffy doesn't. But those of us who are in touch with our actions do. So we express this onto the screen of this thing in front of us. The oneness is unlimited. But because we perceive ourselves to be limited, because we perceive ourselves to be not enough, because we perceive the world to be against us, or whatever belief system we have, that's what shows up on the screen, looking like a reality out there. And while our experience of the projection is real, got that? The experience is real. The limited, distorted perception isn't ultimate reality, which says that if I can see past that limited perspective, I can see something greater. That's where I can see, as the song says, God in everything. It's a perfect projection of our belief, which is why it feels real, which is why it feels normal, because this is how we feel and believe life is. And so when we have experiences like that, they have a landing page in our mind because we've set it up. Usually not consciously. Yes? If we can see through the veil, through the screen, but for just a moment, which is an experience that's often labeled as a mystical vision or a numinous vision, we can momentarily see past the perceived perceptions and catch a glimpse of the infinite oneness, the infinite freedom. And if we can do that, if we have that ability, if we open to that, or we just happen to stumble into it, we're standing in nature one day and all of a sudden it's like going, oh my God, it's all one. Or like I was when I was 13 years old, I'm washing the dishes and all of a sudden, kabam, I'm immersed in the love of, what I call the love of Jesus, being a good Catholic boy, but the infinite loving presence of the universe. And many of us have had that sort of a moment somewhere, and it can shift our perception of life and what we call reality. Even if it's only a little, but it is still an expansion. Once we have something like that, once we taste something like that, we have 2 choices. Suppress it completely and go, no, that's, I don't know what that was. Or we can say there's something there. There's something more there. When I left the Catholic Church as a 17-year-old and as I've defined it, became an evangelical atheist, there is no God and I'll preach that to anybody. I was a little angry at the Catholic Church in those days. But there was a part of me that said, yeah, but at 13 I had this thing, and so I know that there's something more out there, even if it's not what I'm being taught in this church. I couldn't walk away from, there isn't something there. And blessedly, I had an instructor in college who introduced me to Taoism, and that got me to have a whole different cosmology and a whole different understanding of what life could be. Ernest Holmes says, the Bhagavad Gita says, which is a Hindu scripture text, the Bhagavad Gita says you must do away with the pairs of opposites before you enter bliss. Bliss is the state of just knowing my oneness, really truly knowing that. We have to get rid of the pairs of opposites. We have to get rid of the concepts of good and evil. How many of us are completely free of good and evil as opposites? Yeah, my hand's not up either. Big and little, right and wrong, heaven and hell, God and the devil, I'm right and you're wrong. All these things are finite concepts, yet like all finite concepts are being intrinsically drawn from an essence of infinity, as every concept must be. Now that last little part is a deep little awareness. Our projections are still being drawn from an infinite source, yes? Because there's nothing else. Where do I get my idea that I'm not good enough from? It comes eventually from the infinite oneness. We'll talk about this. We talked about this yesterday in our Ernest at Asilomar group, and one of the people in there said, "This sounds like a philosophy class." And I said, "It is. We call ourselves a philosophy." The very projections themselves come from the oneness, the infinite mind, or else they couldn't exist because there is nothing outside of the infinite. The finite, which seems limited, is only the infinite projecting itself at whatever focus level, whatever finite level it is being. I'll say that again. The finite, which seems limited. Let's do a practical. Think of the chair you're sitting on. Okay? It's a finite expression of the infinite saying, I am being myself as chair. Yes? Now, as soon as it says I'm being chair, guess what it's also not being? Everything unchair-like. Yes? With me? Okay? So we have to, we do this when we choose, if I choose to get married to somebody, I'm automatically saying no to everybody else, right? Hopefully. That's our agreement. Some people don't grasp that concept very well, but that's the idea. If I choose to be a minister, I'm saying no to being a brain surgeon. Hopefully. Although I do surgery internally, you might say, on people's brains, but not medically speaking. So whatever the infinite focuses on, it becomes a finite point in space and time of that. And so in that level, it limits itself, but it is not limited. Okay? We always like to say that a thought plus a form, everything begins with a thought and eventually becomes a form, yes? So somebody had the thought of this chair before it became a chair, and then had to do something. This is actually our teaching symbol, our creative process. The upper level is the infinite potentiality, the middle level is the thought, and the bottom level is the form. And all of it is within a circle. All of it is within the oneness. Yes? Okay? So all of it is there. We use the circle to symbolize that which has no beginning and no end. There was a young man who gave his girlfriend a ring. And he said, "This ring symbolizes my love for you. It has no end." And the young woman handed it back to him and said, "This symbolizes my love for you. It has no beginning." That's an Ernest Holmes joke. If you need to, meet me afterwards and I'll explain that to you. The oneness is forever expressing itself, and that which is expressed is always itself expressing. And what that means is we are called not to fight, not to argue, not to resist the projections, but rather to shift our focus to where I can see the oneness in everything. Yes? Ernest Holmes says, every limitation we have, every bondage we have, proclaims the freedom we would obtain if we reverse not the law or the experience of the bondage, but the way we are looking at it. If I suddenly realize that I'm not in bondage, but that there is something that is shifting me to something higher. I'm going to work with this next week when we do our outdoor service and meditation. I had a big aha on this morning for myself. But if we can shift how we look at the things in our lives and recognize, and if we first go and say, okay, there is a oneness here, I'm going to find it. I'm going to see it. I'm going to pierce through my conditioned beliefs about this that says this ain't this awful, and say, there's something more. I'm going to get my telescope. I'm going to get my satellite out into space and look at a higher view of this. Yes? So we are called not to either fight or flee, but to stand in the both and, the paradox of life, and be who we authentically are. There's a poet named Drew Jackson. Actually, Buffy and I had the joy of meeting him last April, and I took a poetry class from him. And he said, for some of us, our instinct is to fixate on what is wrong. Do you know people like that? I know none of you. You know people like that, yes? Okay. Others, like myself, do all we can to block out the horrid and focus on what we consider pleasant. Both are paths that invariably lead us further away from our own humanity. And I would say from our own divinity. We have this concept of which wolf do I want to feed? And the answer is both, because they are both the oneness. If you remember the symbol of Taoism, the yin-yang, the light and the dark, we need both. We need both wolves in our lives. So as we shift our perspective, not trying to erase, but to express, not trying to judge and be self-righteous, but to shift and be compassionately curious with others, with ourselves, we can start to catch a glimpse of the oneness within it all, and thus we start to move from experiencing pieces, separation, to peace, the deep awareness of our oneness. And as we understand that our consciousness is our cause, we let go of doing battle with the projections out there and deepen our awareness of the wholeness, and which is what we really are in a field of oneness, and shift our attention from fighting the effects out here to contemplating the one cause, who we really are, and through that contemplation, letting the true nature of the infinite express through and as us. In other words, I don't try and shift that out there, I try to shift me here, and my perception, and who I am being as the person that I am, the infinite point of oneness that I am. So as we wake up to our oneness, the pieces become the peace. I have a couple of quotes that I like to remember to remind me of this. One, I've used both these fairly recently. The one from Buckminster Fuller I used 2 weeks ago. He says, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. That's the projections out there on the screen. This is sort of like watching a movie and trying to stop the villain on the screen, yes? Doesn't work, does it? No, you got to change something further back. He says you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. To change things, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And about 1800 years before he said that, a Greek philosopher named Plotinus said, I do not argue, I contemplate. If we would take that into our lives, every aspect of our lives, we would shift our lives. I do not argue, I contemplate. And as I contemplate, I let fall the seeds of thought into the mirror of mind, which then becomes the mirror of matter. The seeds that I plant in my mind grow into the mirror of matter. So this week, I'm going to invite us to do a pair of spiritual practices. Number one, become aware of an area in your life where you feel limitation or bondage, where you feel stuckness, something maybe that triggers you. And stretch your mind and ask with compassionate curiosity, how can I see this differently? How can I see the oneness expressing here? And a key for this, by the way, is forgiveness. And I define forgiveness as letting go of condemnation, letting go of where I have judged this as wrong. Because if there's an infinite oneness, There can't be something wrong. There's just the infinite oneness. I may not like it, but that's different than there's something wrong. See, I don't like, as I've talked about before, strawberry ice cream. I like chocolate ice cream. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with strawberry ice cream, right? For you people who love strawberry ice cream, you would be enthusiastically reminding me that there's nothing wrong with it. So how can I see this differently? Forgive, take away the condemnation. That's the key. That's the first practice. Become aware of the area and shift. And then secondly, choose an aspect of the infinite. The love, the life, the power, the beauty, the peace, the joy, the wisdom of the infinite, the abundance of the infinite, and take time to daily contemplate that aspect. To just contemplate that aspect, not trying to change anything in your life, but just say, I'm going to spend 15 minutes meditating on love. I'm going to spend 15 minutes meditating on the concept of wisdom, and let that become part of my cells, become part of my beingness. Are you willing to do those practices this week? Great. I want to close with a quote, a very brief quote, which is a poem from my friend Drew Jackson. He said, "The world is on fire, as it always is. The world is still beautiful, as it always is. We're called to see the paradox. We're called to see both wolves and to realize that both are necessary." And so we have an affirmation. Say this with me. I see the oneness ever more clearly in everything and everyone. Once again, I see the oneness ever more clearly ever and in everything and everyone. And so it is. Thank you.